Hi, my name's Andy Strano and I am RentDelorean.com. Welcome to my world. Hi, my name's Andy Strano. I am originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Grew up there, went to college at Penn State University, graduated there with a bachelor's degree in art, and moved out to Las Vegas. For 13 years, I lived out there as a school teacher. And just recently, about 3 years ago, I moved here to outside of Minneapolis, Minnesota, and set up shop here with my family of my wife and my 3 boys. So I am currently, and this is my 16th year, I'm an art teacher. I teach elementary school art as well as a class in high school art. This is what I've been doing, and it's really, really fun because it gives me a lot of freedom to do what I'd like when it comes to being creative and sharing the creative passion with kids of many, many different ages, from kindergarten the whole way up to seniors in high school. And also, I am the owner of RentDelorean.com, located here outside of Minneapolis, Minnesota, but I also cater to the entire World Wide Web when it comes to renting out DeLorean cars. This is something I started a few years ago. We really kind of kicked it off back in 2015. One of my good friends that I've known since first grade, and we have kind of started Rent DeLorean as a way to reach out to the DeLorean community to get their cars, my car, Delorean Time Machine cars, as well as stock cars, out into the public eye for whatever reason, for events and things like that. So when I was about 10 years old, a movie came out that I'm sure you hopefully have seen, Back to the Future, and I fell in love with it the first time I ever saw it. But the other side of that was my best friend growing up. I've known him since we were in first grade. He was always the Doc character. He was the science nerd. And then I was kind of just the Marty kid hanging around kind of thing, even though we were the same age. But he was always working on some kind of science experiment, and I just liked to be around all of that. So for Back to the Future, it just kind of, it was him and I in the movies. So when I first saw that movie, I just, all of a sudden, I fell in love with what the movie was about, the relationship between Doc and Marty, as well as the car. I just really, really thought it was a cool car. I mean, not just the DeLorean itself, but the idea of time travel and being able to go back in time and mess things up and change things for the better and things like that. So while he was doing experiments and I was just kind of hanging out in his basement, even though we called it the lab, we were children of the 80s. We grew up in the late 80s and early 90s, the beginnings of the internet, and we just really enjoyed figuring things out, seeing the world unravel as we saw it. And when you watch Back to the Future, you kind of see that with Marty when he goes back to a time that Doc grew up in and he knew a lot about. So that was kind of a neat thing when I would, when you see Back to the Future, the relationship between Marty and Doc. And that really was my good friend that I've known for my entire life. Fast forward, now he's a big computer geek, and he is still the scientist in my life. So when there's technical questions and stuff, him and I kind of started this whole Rent DeLorean thing, and He does all the technical side of things, and I'm kind of the face of it. And he's not as obsessed as I am when it comes to Back to the Future and DeLoreans and Time Machine. And he's not in the community or anything like that. He's kind of the behind the scenes guy. But I think we work well together when it comes to, he sees the passion that I have, not just for the movie, but for the car. And really enjoy taking the car out and sharing that passion with other people, with the public, with my friends. So it's really kind of just become, when you first see this collection, you think, boy, this guy is obsessed. But I don't know what you would call it. It's kind of borderline obsessed, borderline, I don't know. There's probably a medical term for it that I don't know yet. But I don't know. Well, getting into this, though, I also have other genres that I really, really enjoy, too. Just growing up, like I said, in the late 80s and 90s. Back to the Future also went along with my, I really enjoyed Ghostbusters and things like that. So I made a little collection of that as well. But I kind of made a pact in my own mind that I'm going to stay with one genre, because you could really start to fill up a house or even a storage unit with stuff if you start buying everything you see that you liked as a kid. So, I have some things of the things that I really, really liked, but I'm sticking with Back to the Future for now until something drastic happens. I don't really, I don't really know. So there's an iconic scene in the first movie, and if you're a fan of Back to the Future, the first time you see the car pull out of Doc's truck, if you're a true fan, every time you see that scene, you get goosebumps. And that's exactly how it is for me. To see that car roll out with the music in the background and Marty watching this thing just come out of a truck, and then all of a sudden he sees his best friend, Marty, you made it. And it's such a cool scene. So every time I see that scene, that's one of my favorite scenes of the whole movie. So Back to the Future really affected me growing up in the sense that there's this time machine that he could go to the future and see how we all turn out. And as a kid, I was always, especially as a creative person, I was always thinking of neat things that would be really cool to have, and you watch the movie, you see flying cars and all these, hoverboards and all that kind of stuff. And as a kid, I was always thinking of what things we have now could be better, in the future. So I'm always thinking about, and now it seems like we are living in the future. I mean, everything is technology this and technology that and all that kind of stuff. And I think back of when I was a kid and what I didn't have, but we have today. It's just such a neat thing that we have going on here. So as a kid, Back to the Future was always on the forefront of my head, thinking, what improvements are we as a human race going towards? Speaking of, it's a DeLorean email right there. So, what came first, the car or the collection? I'm going to start with the collection, because as a kid, when you're about 13, 14 years old, obviously you don't have the kind of money to look at, buying a DeLorean. I do remember right near my high school growing up, there was an auto body shop, and there was one parked right outside of the auto body shop, and every time my bus went by it, it didn't matter who was talking to me on the bus. Every day, it was there for probably a couple months. I can't remember. But it was just sitting outside. It must have been getting work done or something. I don't know who the owner was and all that kind of stuff. But I would watch it every day go by, and it kind of made my day, and then until finally one day it wasn't there anymore. The love of the car came first. The collection started. I remember going to Universal Studios when I think I was about 13, 14 years old. I got to see the train, and obviously at that time period, the Back to the Future ride was still there. This was in Universal Studios, Florida. And that is where I first bought a 2015 Marty hat, and I believe I still have that hat somewhere. And I also bought my first DeLorean model, so I got to take home a model and build that model, and I still have that model today. And it is just so neat to see something that I built myself as a young teenager, and that really kind of started that passion. And then every once in a while, I remember then, I think it was, I want to say late 90s, I can't remember the exact year, that McDonald's actually put out Back to the Future toys, and I remember collecting a bunch of those, as many as I could. And again, that's part of the collection. So yeah, and then after that, the collection just started growing. Every once in a while, I would see something that I liked and try to grab it. And but the thing is, when you're a collector for Back to the Future, especially before a lot of the toys started really coming out, it was very difficult to find anything because there was no internet that you could like look on for you know. Like I said, kids have it easy these days. If you want something, you just go on the internet and find it, on eBay or whatever. But back then, I remember when I went to that Universal Studios, the store, there were so many things that I was like, I want this, I want this, I want this. But I remember just walking out with the hat and the model, and that was it. But so I guess I had to wait till I became an adult when toys started coming out and models and all that kind of stuff. And now it's just a really cool time to live in with, it seems like every couple months there's another item that you can try to snag and stuff. So, and the thing is today, collectors, they just go crazy when it comes to something coming out. As soon as something comes to the market, everybody bought it already. So either got to be, quick to the trigger to try to grab it, or kind of also have some self-control when it comes to, what you want and what you can afford and all that kind of stuff. So when it comes to one of the things that I really, really like of the whole collection, it would have to be the car. I don't know if you could see it behind me. So it is one of my favorite toys, and that's why I have it in the house, because it's kind of my prized possession. That, and there's another piece in the collection, is one of the Hot Toys, and it's hanging inside the garage. I found this thing on Craigslist, of all things, a few years ago when I lived in Las Vegas. Someone posted it up, and I believe it came out in the late 90s, where a little kid could actually sit in it and ride around and stuff. Now the one I have, it sat outside for so long throughout the years that the whatever it's made out of, the plastic, is very, very brittle. So I just kind of have it hanging from the ceiling as a piece. I would love to restore it someday to where you could actually, sit on it. But right now, if you would have somebody sit on it, it would probably crack. But those things are hard to come by as well. So those two pieces are probably my favorite two in the entire collection. So when it comes to other genres that I really, really like, again, I love Ghostbusters, that and Star Trek. The Star Trek The Next Generation is what I started watching. And then from then, I would go to the Star Trek conventions all the time in Pittsburgh. My mom would drop my friend and I off at the hotel at this Star Trek convention, and we would spend the whole day just geeking out. And again, Star Trek is another TV show with lots of cool gadgets and toys and future things and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of latched on to the world of Star Trek, so I am totally a Trekkie as well. A few years ago, when I was still living in Las Vegas and I was teaching high school, one of my students, who knew that I was a huge Back to the Future fan, knew that I loved time travel things, mentioned to me that I should look into this thing called Doctor Who. And I said, oh, I don't really know anything about it, blah, blah, blah. And, they said, well, just check it out. So I went home and I started watching the reboots. How have I missed this growing up? So from then on, again, it wasn't so much the Doctor that I was interested in. It's the thing that got him from point A to point B, just Back to the Future. But instead of a car, now it's a phone booth. And now I own two phone booths that I put together here. The one that's outside of my house is a full-scale TARDIS. It's about 9 feet tall, and it's in the ground, and it's very, very neat way to meet the neighbors kind of thing. The community they just seem to love it. When I first moved here, I built this thing. And I've met Doctor Who fans, and I've met people that have no idea what Doctor Who is. But the fact that it's a library, you open it up and there's just books all over the place, as well as geocaching. Once I erected the TARDIS and put lots of books in it, I came across another fanatic out there that is a geocacher, and he approached me one day, found me through my website, and said, "Hey, what do you think about us putting a geocache inside the TARDIS in front of your house?" And I said, "Sure." What's geocaching? I had no idea what that was. He kind of explained it to me. Again, it had that techie feeling to it, and I said, yes, I want that thing in there. So we got a geocache built into the TARDIS now. So not only do I have book enthusiasts coming every day to this thing, but I have geocachers, and that's been really fun too. Another movie again that I remember watching when I was younger was Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Bill, Ted, they're kind of wonky guys, but in that movie, again, there's another character, which is their time machine, the phone booth. So just this past summer, it just kept itching at me and itching at me. And sometimes as an artist, and artists, you know what I'm talking about, sometimes you get an idea in your head of something that you want to build or make or paint or whatever, and you know that you can't rest until you do it. So the thought kind of popped in my head that, hey, I kind of want to build a Bill and Ted's phone booth. And sure enough, through some help from a friend of mine that actually tore apart his deck, he had just a bunch of old wood and stuff, and I asked him, I said, what are you gonna do with that wood? And nothing. So I went up and just started building this thing, and so now I have a my Bill and Ted booth, as well as the TARDIS and the time machine. So my goal is that when we have more conventions and stuff, I love going to Comic Cons and things like that with the car, but now my goal is to bring 3 time machines to this thing where you can actually experience a few different time machines, not just the DeLorean as well. Because again, you know, you meet different types of people, people that love, you know, love Doctor Who, love Back to the Future, and now I can also reach out to people that grew up in the 80s when it came to Bill and Ted type stuff. So the question is, where is the line drawn between collector, and being obsessed with it? My thing is, it depends on how much it costs. So when I go to Walmart or Target or wherever, I always go to the toy section just to kind of browse to see, you know, what they got. If there is a Hot Wheel there with a DeLorean that literally is $3 or $4, I'm grabbing it, of course. If there's 3 or 4 of them, I'll probably grab all of them as well. Now, generally that doesn't happen as much anymore, but sometimes it does, and it's a great day when it does. Now, if you go somewhere where there's, you know, if you go to a toy swap or something and they have a very, very expensive toy, a DeLorean that you know, a Back to the Future piece that I don't have, but, you know, it's $900. Well, then, you know what? I don't think I'm obsessed. Now it's just to the point where I'm, okay, that would be cool to have in my collection, but I don't have one of those. So I'm okay with that. So I think you have to kind of draw a line between, you know, when you look at your finances, and then you also look at, where am I going to put this thing? So one toy that I've always wanted, and I've seen them for sale every once in a while, is the Back to the Future arcade game, the pinball machine, I'm sorry. And that would just be a cool thing to own, I think. And I've seen, like I've said, I've seen them online before. Sometimes they pop up here and there, but they're just way too expensive. So, you know what? I think someday if something happens where somebody says, hey, I'm getting rid of this, and I know you're a huge fan, I'll give it to you for this amount of money and catch a deal. Then I'll probably, hopefully get lucky. But until then, I'll go to somebody's place and maybe play with it or something like that. That's the cool thing about having lots of Back to the Future friends, DeLorean friends, is there's a good chance somebody else has one and you can kind of check it out for yourself without having to pay anything. So when I first really got into the movie, probably when I was about 10 or 11 years old, I said to myself, I am going to own one of those cars someday. And sure enough, it happened. When I moved out to Las Vegas, I was a DeLorean fan, so I reached out to, I thought, I wonder if there's a club in town that you know, DeLorean owners. You know, so I looked up on the internet and found a local club and said, hey, I'm a huge fan. I'm thinking about buying a car someday, but can I just hang out with you guys? You know, and they were very, very cool. And I started hanging out with them on the weekends and kind of see it, because I was not a car guy. I'm still really not a car guy. I'm still kind of learning. when it comes to this car, all the technicalities and all that kind of stuff. But they were very open when it came to just showing me what it would be like to own this thing. And about a year or two, I think it was about a year later, after having a conversation with these guys, like, I really want one, but I don't know what I'm looking for and all that kind of stuff, one pops up for sale. And that was a neat experience, because when I called the owner up and said, hey, I want to come look at the car, my posse came with me. And they showed up with their DeLoreans, and they kind of showed the owner, like, okay, this isn't just some Back to the Future fan. This guy wants a car, and we want to make sure that he's getting a good one. So that was kind of a neat thing. So that was the first DeLorean that I actually owned. The one I own now is actually my second DeLorean. The first one I owned, I wasn't in the financial position that I a little bit am now, a little older now, and all that kind of stuff. So when I bought that car, it really kind of put me into some debt, because I didn't know what I was doing, and I wasn't married yet. I didn't have, I had my teaching job, but I was still struggling. So that car, if to the owners, to the potential owners out there, make sure you're in a financially good position before you do an investment like this, because with every DeLorean purchase comes a risk. So just be careful what you're doing. I know it's very easy to just jump into something and, it'll be fine. But what happened with me was I started using my credit card quite a bit to, to update the car and all that kind of stuff. Because these are things, it's an old car. You got to keep up on the things. So finally, I think it was after about 2 years, I sold the car. It was about a few years ago when I was in a right spot where I could, I found one that was a good car fit for me. So that's the one that I have now. So I can kind of say that I own one car, but this is my second DeLorean. When I first started getting into trying to make it look more like a time machine stuff, I was printing pictures off, making paper time circuits, and I was laminating a picture of the flux capacitor just so that I could put it inside there. I had pool hoses from the house that I had in Las Vegas. I had a bunch of old, so I put all these hoses all over it. It looked terrible, but it wasn't until maybe 2 or 3 years later, somebody found me that they wanted the car for an event, but they wanted it to look like a Back to the Future car. And I told him, I said, well, I kind of have some stuff I made myself. And the guy said, well, why don't you bring it down here and dress it up the way you do for, your car shows or whatever, to make it look like Back to the Future, and we'll see what you got. So I went down there, and I was pretty humbled when he saw this and says, yeah, we're not gonna use that stuff. So he introduced me to his builder, and this older gentleman walks into his office, and here I am, like, I brought the car, but they've already made fun of it because it's not good enough, but they've got a plan, kind of thing. And this guy walks in with a Cub hat, and I see Christopher Lloyd. He's an older guy. He kind of looks like Christopher Lloyd, but he's a builder, and he's got this huge shop of just raw materials and stuff. So I spent the next couple weekends taking the car down, and him and I would figure out how to make this car look genuinely like the Back to the Future car, with flux bands and with LED lights and all that kind of fun stuff, without spending $1 million on it. The next few months, I spent some really good times with this guy, and he literally has maybe seen Back to the Future once. And here's Doc Brown, in my mind, building a time machine with me. But I'll never forget, he was also a really, really just a funny, charismatic guy. So he comes into this office, and he takes off his hat, and he goes, well, let me show you something, So he actually had like longer white hair, and he goes, well, yeah, just bring the car down here, and we'll fix it up for you, and all that. And it was like transformation of Doc Brown, and I thought, him and I are going to become best friends. He's really kind of taught me on how to take things that were headed to the trash and create things out of it, either for fun or for actual paying customers. So he's a builder, and I owe him a lot. I was in the right place at the right time. The car looks amazing for the cost. And it just blew my mind, the talent that this guy has when it comes to being able to see some pictures from a movie that he hardly even saw. He didn't even care too much about the fact, I mean, here I am, a crazy lunatic when it comes to Back to the Future stuff. And when we got it all done and lit up and stuff, he looks at me and says, "You're like a kid in a candy store." Like, what, and I'm like, "Dude, you don't understand. I've been waiting for this day since I was 10 years old." So one of the most recent updates that I've done to the time machine is the programmable time circuits. For as long as I've had the car, my time circuits were just LED lights behind the box. And yeah, that looked super awesome in pictures and all that kind of stuff. But just recently, a guy that has become another great DeLorean friend over the years gifted me one of these sets and totally blew me away with this gift. And now I have where you can actually type in the buttons, and it's really neat to do for birthday parties. You could type in the birth date of whoever it is or their wedding anniversary or things like that. And that has been such a fun thing to have in the car. And after I put that in there, I thought that, there was a fraction of a second of me thinking, the car is finished. This is it. But then after that, I started thinking, well, I still need to do this and I still want to do that. And I was still do this. So when it comes to the car being done, it's never going to be done. And once you think it is done, something breaks and you got to refix it anyway. But in any case, that has been my most fun thing of the most recent item that I've put into the car. So if you are a fan of Back to the Future, or if you're thinking about getting a DeLorean to show up to your kid's birthday party or a huge corporate event, please reach out to us through RentDelorean.com. Here for all your future needs.
Well, don't forget about those social media platforms.
Oh yeah, how could I forget? Yeah, also reach out. We also have a Facebook page, an Instagram page, Twitter, and I believe that is it.
Well, don't forget about that tube of yours. I don't remember what it's called, but I think you own it, don't you?
Oh yeah, I forgot about our YouTube channel as well. I've been trying to put some videos up there and things like that, so lots of ways to find us. Thanks for watching and hope to see you in the future.
Don't forget, your future hasn't been written yet, so make it a good one.